From a family with weird beliefs to a family with a mysterious disappearance, the Jamison family is definitely a very interesting story. Today, I will dive into that very story. I hope you enjoy. The Jamison family wasn't necessarily a normal family. This is because of their odd beliefs. They believed in witchcraft and many things related to that. At one point, Sherilyn Jamison even told her mother-in-law that she had guessed out a demon from someone. These beliefs caused them to think their house in Eufaula, Oklahoma was haunted by spirits. This very much frightened them and eventually caused them to seek out moving away from their home in Eufaula, Oklahoma. And the people around them didn't sway those beliefs one bit, though. This was because their friends and family believed that their house was haunted also, at least a little bit of them, not every single one of them. They decided to move to a remote 40-acre plot of land about 30 miles away from their original house in Eufaula. One day, they went out to take a look at their property, which is when they disappeared. Eventually, the police were called after 7 days because their family members got worried because they had not come home. At first, investigators assumed that they had just gone camping or something, and just didn't tell anybody. But eventually, someone found the Jamisons' car with their tiny dog trapped inside, without the Jamisons in it. Along with the dog, they left their coats, phones, camera, and many other things. This was very odd to Bobby's mother because this does not seem like something they would do. After this discovery, the largest missing search in the history of the state of Oklahoma would undergo. During the search, investigators would discover things in the car that would add to the mystery even more. One of those things was an 11-page letter from Sherilyn to Bobby that said she could care less about their daughter. She would also talk about many things she hated about Bobby. Most notably, she would say he was a loner and a hermit. She would also go on to say that she wanted a divorce from him. Though you might think this clearly points to Sherilyn being the reason for him missing, there was no sign of struggle. After all of this, 4 years later, some hunters found some skeletal remains of 2 adults and 1 child. These remains were only found 2.7 miles away from where the truck of the Jamison family had been found. And other than the 3 skulls and some bone fragments, there was simply just the victim's shoe and some other torn pieces of clothing. Only 8 months later, it was confirmed that the bodies were the ones of the Jamison family. You may be thinking to yourself, why did they not find the bodies during the search 4 years before? I mean, it was the largest search in the history of Oklahoma. When asked about that question by the media, the assistant special agent of Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation told them, quote, falling leaves potentially obscured the bodies. Later, it was considered impossible to find the cause of death because the bodies were so badly decomposed. The sheriff's department and the FBI had many leads that they spent a long time chasing down. The sheriff would later state, quote, a lot of investigators would love to have as many leads as we do. The problem is they point in so many different directions. Later, some CCTV footage was found where the Jamisons were walking back and forth from their truck and their house with no emotion, in almost a zombie-like state. Because of this video, it was assumed that drugs played a role in their disappearance, but many people don't feel that it is hard to believe that that's how they acted in the video was because of all the emotions in the house at the time. Remember, they did believe their house was haunted, and their paranoia could have led them to act that way. Also, Sherilyn didn't like Bobby too, so that could have played into the tension also. Other than the CCTV footage, the police also found that they made an outgoing call on November 12th, which was the day they went missing. Eventually, the sheriff who started on the case, Sheriff Beauchamp, eventually would leave the service. Now at first he suspected that foul play had caused the deaths of the Jamison family, but the new Sheriff Jesse James said, quote, "It is a very strange deal, you know, the way the case has unfolded. We were looking at a lot of things that crossed my mind." And he would also say later, quote, "Normally you can go through an investigation and one by one start to eliminate certain scenarios. We hadn't been able to do that in this case. With this family, everything seems possible." At this point, the case would essentially go cold. At this point, there are many theories on what happened to the Jamison family. Because of that, I've decided to talk about 3. But I will put a link in the description to a website with more of the theories if you are interested. The first theory is that they simply had just gotten lost in the woods and died from hypothermia. This theory does make sense because they were in a mountainous area and it can get cold there at nights, especially in October. Many people think this theory is wrong though, because they were found side by side face down. This makes it look like it could have been an execution. In other words, if they died from hypothermia, it would be highly unlikely that the bodies would be positioned that way. Even though the positions of the body were odd, I still think the hypothermia theory has credibility because there were no confirming bullet wounds on the bodies, and the position could also be merely just a coincidence. Given all of that, I would rate this theory a 4.5 out of 10. The second theory is that it was a murder-suicide. This makes some sense when you first think about it. Sherilyn had written a very angry letter about how she had hated Bobby and how she could care less about their daughter. But when you look even closer at the facts, murder-suicide seems very unlikely. Firstly, like stated in the previous theory, the position of the bodies makes the likelihood of this happening go down. This is because if it was a murder-suicide, the person who killed themselves would not be face down right next to other bodies. This is because if you kill yourself, you can't really control where you fall or lay down. You might say that the killer could lay themselves face down and then kill themselves. Though this is a possibility, I don't think it would be possible because, as stated in the letter, she did not care for them. This is also saying that Sherilyn would be the one doing the murder-suicide. I'm just going to leave that, say that. But also, so since she didn't care of them, because of that, I don't see why she would want her final resting place to be next to them. Another reason why a murder-suicide theory loses credibility is because if Sherilyn did it, she would have most likely used a .22 pistol she had on her to kill them, and then kill herself. If this were the case, the gun would likely be close to the bodies. And they never found a gun, and you can't really move a gun after you've killed yourself. So that really makes it lose credibility. Because of that and the position of the bodies, I find it unlikely that a murder-suicide is a possibility. I would rate this theory a 2 out of 10. Another theory is that it could have been a drug deal gone wrong. In fact, the area of Oklahoma where the Jamisons lived, as well as the area they were hoping to move in the Sandboys Mountains, is well known for its drug activity. Also, Bobby had reported a person who had been running a meth lab. Many people think that the Jamison family had come across a drug deal or meth lab in the woods and were killed because the people in the drug deal thought they would tell the police. Though this makes sense and can be very likely because their bodies were on the ground laying as if they had been executed. But the only thing holding this theory back is that, number one, the people who killed them would most likely have searched the truck and stolen stuff, but they didn't. Also, other than the possible bullet hole in one of their skulls, there were no other bullet holes in the skeletal remains. If they were killed by the drug dealers, they would have all been definitely shot, in my opinion. Even though there were no bullet holes, they could have gotten killed another way, so the drug deal gone wrong is definitely a strong possibility, in my opinion. I would rate this theory a 6 out of 10. The death of the Jamison family is shrouded in mystery and still has many questions. Hopefully one day, whatever happened to them comes to light so that their family members will know what happened to their loved ones. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, you like it. You dislike it, I don't care. I hope you have a good day. Peace.